Hello there, this is Paul Glumaz once again. Today is the 8th of August 2019, and just when things were looking like Donald Trump was headed towards improving relations with Russia and China and getting negotiations with Iran and dealing with North Korea and all of that, everything is shifting. And what has happened is the empire has struck back big time on three major interconnected fronts. The first is eco-fascism mobilization that they're on, and I'll go into that a little bit. The second is a reorientation of the global financial system, and I'll get into that. And the third one is a massive escalation of the strategy of tension internationally and inside the United States. So I'll start first with the eco-fascist mobilization. Last Halloween in Great Britain, a movement was formed that's spreading throughout Europe and North America primarily. It is called the Extinction Rebellion. And the principle behind it is we have to now stop our economic development, stop our use of coal and oil. We have to stop and begin shutting it all down, because if we don't, we will run out of resources and the human race will go extinct. Never mind the fact that none of these resources existed until we invented the technology and discovered the science to create those resources. Oh no, 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 no. And that we are going to invent new technologies as we go to more higher energy density resources, eventually fusion power. Oh no, 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 no. None of that is real. So this entire 30, 40 years of propaganda on population reduction, on environmentalism, on carrying capacity, and the IPCC, which came later, and all of this is vectoring now into this type of mobilization. And the key to this mobilization will be the deployment of children and adolescents, not even in college yet, into waves of protests. And this is getting underway. This is where children are told they don't need to go to school because the world could come to an end. They need to get out in the streets. And children, what do they know, right? What do they know? And so this is designed to escalate into September, October, and continue escalating all the way for the so-called 18 months that Prince Charles has declared. We have to change everything in 18 months or else. And 18 months from the declaration of Prince Charles is, of course, the re-inauguration of Donald Trump in his second term. Now that's just a cover. Okay, that is not the actual way this thing will work. That's the surface. So all the Democrats, as far as the U.S. goes, all the Democrats will be pushed heavily in this direction. All the moderate Democrats will be pushed heavily. Billionaires connected to the City of London, billionaires connected to the IT sector, which I'll get into, are going to be pumping money in for this transformation to a carbon-less society, which means less, a much horrible future. All of this is going to be mobilized as you go into the election year in the United States. But that's just the cover. That's just the so-called cover for something else that's been created over the last 20 years or longer. It's getting ready to be unleashed at the height of this whole thing. And that's called deep green resistance. Now you all know about so-called Islamic terrorism, which is really not Islamic. It's it's a mercenary structure that's been built off of these very ignorant people in these very backward areas who are recruited into as soldiers and mercenaries under a so-called Islamic cover. Hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on this. This is ISIS, this is Al-Qaeda, this is Al-Nusra. Hundreds of billions of dollars over many years, going back to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and earlier. Well, what makes you think that if the British Empire and the British Crown and the British institutions are calling for a reduction of world population to 1 billion, what makes you think they're not going to do the same thing? And the movement they created and have in the background ready to go is called Deep Green Resistance. And they are training people and have been training people to blow up dams, railways, canals, power plants. Why not? You're the resistance against modern civilization's destruction of the world. You are, and then they're equating, the media is equating this drive for economic development with Nazi Germany. You know, so if you're a young terrorist trained and financed, and you know, and you have the same outlook as the shooters in El Paso and Dayton in terms of your worldview, why not do the right thing and resist and blow up all these, be there? And that's being set up. That's already set up. That's already being set up. I've known about this for a long time. You know, you saw a lot of it in the 70s and 80s and you know, eco-terrorism. But this is big. This is what's being set up. So that's supposed to coincide at the height of this whole thing. This is the Empire Strikes Back. You have to keep that in mind. Now we go to the financial side of it. Okay, and this is very important, because these things don't happen one separate from the other. Here's where it gets very interesting. Okay, what you have was the crisis of 2008 and the bailouts. And coming out of that in 2009 at the G20 meeting in London, something was set up called the Financial Stability Board, whose purpose was to coordinate cross-national responses to systemically significant financial institutions which were in trouble. And what they did is they got all the countries to adopt, pass laws that set up the ability to do what's called the bail-in, where they can take a bank that's in deep trouble and convert some of its deposits or its liabilities into bank stock. And this is supposed to give a little margin. But nonetheless, ever since 2008, the same financial system has been growing. Financial bubbles have been growing. Now you have the corporate debt bubble, where every corporation is borrowing money and to increase its value, to reinvest in their stock and prop up the stock value. You have all these overextended oil fracking, transportation, because the economy isn't moving forward. You have all these debts that can't be paid. Their interest can't be paid on it. And so you have essentially coming into where are you going to go? And so under the Financial Stability Board, and I'll get this real quick here, something was set up called the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And so the idea is that, well, climate change, global warming, and climate incidents can have an effect on the financial structure. Therefore, we set up this thing called the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, to advise investors, lenders, and insurance about climate-related risks. And one of the key people involved is Michael Bloomberg of New York. Now, in that context, the current head of the Financial Stability Board is Mark Carney. He is currently also the head of the Bank of England and formerly was head of the Bank of Canada. So this whole thing, out of this came something called the Green Finance Initiative. Now, endorsing the TCFD are institutions that have essentially $118 trillion worth of assets. $118 trillion of assets. Institutions are endorsing this. And sure enough, the British government came out with a 73-page white paper, okay, which says that the white paper says the centrality of the TCFD is climate-related disclosures. So what they're doing is this, and this is what's being set up, is that the City of London, where the largest share of financial activity goes on, not just derivatives and speculation, but also financial investments and financial transactions, are going to shift it all to the Green Initiative. What's the Green Initiative? It's green projects. So now we're going to go into the hyper-trillion-dollar mother of all financial bubbles involving green projects, which will kill every economy you can imagine. So essentially what the City of London is getting ready to do is redline, the old term redlining, the real economy for green projects. And then all this money is going to come into green projects, and all the greedy people are lining up to get that money. But in so doing, they're disrupting the real economy. But even more so, many of the countries in the world which are hoping to have their development through the Belt and Road Initiative of China, and are trying to survive, looking to survival through their involvement in the Belt and Road Initiative, are still, however, tied in with this international financial system. And a lot of the lending within that financial system would naturally go to those areas, to investing in those areas. But now there's an excuse for the City of London to cut off all these areas of investment, to starve the real economy and say only green economy. And that dovetails with this whole eco-mobilization, because why is the City of London doing this? Because they are environmentally conscious of the threat to the planet of economic development and the threat to the planet of carbon and global warming. The whole thing is a total fraud. The guy who created the carbon thing was Maurice Strong. He's a criminal. He had to hide in China for stealing the funds for the children of Iraq. He and Kofi Annan. The guy's a criminal. And in interviews, he said, look, the reason we pick carbon is because we want to deindustrialize the planet, and we can't. This is the only substance we can pick to make the bad item, because we want to deindustrialize the planet, and we can't pick anything else. That carbon is the essence of any economy, of any development, what have you. And its abundance is very good and very healthy for the planet, because plants grow and thrive. The more plants you have, the better. The less extreme the weather, and so on and so forth. So that's a digression. So this whole thing, so the financial crowd is moving to cut off credit to all things, what have you. And then you have these people in the Democratic Party pushing the New Deal, right? The New Green New Deal, or we're going to rebuild America On what? On solar and windmill and what have you? No, no, you're not going to do that. But this is complete motion in this direction, and this is the way they're attacking the Belt and Road. Now, the third aspect of all of this is the strategy of tension. The British are unleashing all their assets for a strategy of tension. And as long as they have John Bolton in the the National Security Agency, you know, they got a lot to work with. John Bolton was on his way out, but all of a sudden now the Iran situation has been re-triggered. The Venezuelan situation has been re-triggered. And now, following the meeting and press conference of Trump with Imran Khan of Pakistan, where Trump said that Modi had asked him to mediate, all hell has broke out in the Indian subcontinent because Rahul Gandhi has attacked Modi for this, and Modi's reaction is to go right to the attack, just like Trump's reaction is to go right to the attacks on him. And now we have a crisis over Kashmir. Again, the British are unleashing this inside India, Pakistan, and nobody has more familiarity with India and Pakistan than the British. And they still have a lot of assets. Not to speak of the fact that the Saudis and the various other emirates have been funding the international terrorist apparatus in the hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, somewhere probably 25 to 50 billion a year goes into these assets. So and that spills over into Pakistan, which then spills over into Kashmir, and spills over in Afghanistan. So all of this is the strategy of tension. And there are other places where the strategy of tension is being unleashed, like in Venezuela, or in Taiwan, or even more so in Hong Kong, where the U.S. has got its nose in there in those demonstrations. Even though Trump said that the Chinese were handling it okay, the U.S. other agencies got their nose in there, and actually the U.S. ambassador went and met with these people, you know, or the U.S. consul met with these people, and these people are now going for independence of Hong Kong. So this is designed to trigger through the violence. Is designed to ultimately, if the Hong Kong authorities cannot handle the violence and it gets out of control, then the Chinese government, central government, will have to move in, and then that's a whole nother ratcheting up. So all these areas of tension. Now, there's also an internal strategy of tension that is being unleashed, and the El Paso and Dayton mass shootings reflect the same hatred of humanity in these young people. And the manifesto of the shooter in El Paso was straight out of the eco-fascist playlist. You know, he was for all those population reduction and all of that. So you'll find that these are not really right-wingers. These are people, per se, these are people motivated by a belief that that there's too many people and we have to get rid of the extra people and so on and so forth. So this is what's going on. And of course they have no sense of a future. And Donald Trump is saying that the problem is the U.S. culture has become very dark and very negative about the future, and that Trump has a space program that's designed to revive that a different future. But this is a very dark situation, and Donald Trump has correctly said that the problem is the culture. But what the media has done is they have said that it was Donald Trump's so-called anti-immigration posture which triggered this, which is not true. And Beto O'Rourke has come out saying that Trump's rallies and speeches should be outlawed as incitements to violence. In other words, get rid of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That's a presidential candidate saying that. A presidential candidate is saying that the president's public rallies and speeches should be made unlawful. That is very provocative. And he was seconded, I believe, in part by Kamala Harris. So what you're dealing with here is not an abatement of the assault on the presidency, but an actual escalation of the assault on the presidency. The Mueller, who's Mueller? Mueller, they forgot about Mueller. Mueller doesn't exist anymore. That's all gone. Russia, 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 that's all gone. Now we're on to the fascist president triggering riots, triggering mass murder. He's a mass murderer. See, he's a mass murderer. That's where the Democrats are going. Again, what is this? It's the strategy of tension internally in the U.S. Now, I got to say something to you. As far as I've been able to figure out over the years, all these internal terrorist incidences and mass killings, a lot of times the FBI seems to be involved somehow. Either they're monitoring the person or they're triggering the person or whatever. There seems to be too close a relationship between the FBI and these mass murderers. And one of these days we're going to get to that. And there's going to be a lot of FBI agents going and being indicted for this. But we don't have all of the evidence, but it's been going on for a long time, and a lot of these people are informants, a lot of these people are known to the FBI. They don't do anything. The local law enforcement and the local community point out who these people are. The FBI says, we're now in charge, okay? And then nothing happens. Well, you got to ask yourself, why is that? Now, why is all this being done? Because you're at the end of the system. And what do they fear? Those whose system is ending. They're only fearful that a new system will emerge that they don't control. And that's exactly what is possible now. Russia, China, the US, and India have the means, in the collapse of the financial system, to establish a new architecture where nations no longer are under the control of the City of London and Wall Street. That's where we could be soon in this crisis. And that's what these three things are: the eco-terrorism, the eco-mobilization, the financial shift that's taking place at the City of London, and the strategy of tension, are all designed to prevent that from happening. And where is that new system taking place? That new system is taking place around something called the Belt and Road. Okay, because as you move to develop the infrastructure, you're creating the underlying physical infrastructure for a new architecture, for trade, where nations can trade with each other who are next to each other instead of having to go around each other because you don't have the infrastructure. This is the end of their system, and it could be the beginning of our system. The system that goes back to Hamilton, goes back to Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, LaRouche. This is the beginning of that system. We are in the beginning of that, potential beginning of that system that replaces this system. As soon as you implement Glass-Steagall, you wipe out the financialization of all assets. Every asset that we have is being financialized. The instrument, the financial instrument attached to that asset is being resold in terms of the financial speculation, in terms of the international market. So they're being either repackaged or resold as leveraged derivatives and so forth and so on. Everything is being financialized. Your healthcare payment to the insurance company is part of the is being refinancialized. The cost of that is being passed on to the people who are receiving healthcare, or to the hospitals, or to whatever. Everything is being financialized and into this international system. And that's about to come to an end. We are coming to that period, between now and the re-election of Donald Trump, is going to be the most intense, scary, but potentially fruitful period in human history. And that's where we are. The empire is striking back. But the difference is they're doing it in their own name. They're not hiding behind a Hitler or some other character. They're doing it in their own name. The British Empire.